Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to explore some wild stories of r/family drama. For those tuning in for the first time, each day I read real stories from Reddit, perfect for decompressing, finding a moment of tranquility, or simply enjoying a quiet break during your studies. Before we dive in, share in the comments where you're tuning in from, and if you're keen on more content of this nature, make sure to hit that subscribe button. So, get comfortable, prepare your favorite snack, and let's begin exploring today's stories. My mom told everyone I stole the family cabin. I didn't even know it was mine. I'm the middle child, 31F, between two brothers, 35ME Evan and 24ME Leo. And if you ask anyone in our town who the good kid is, they'll point at Evan without thinking. He's the dependable oldest, coach of a junior soccer team, volunteers at the fireworks booth every July 4th, knows everyone at church by name. I live 2 hours away, work in tech, never remember potlucks, and allegedly don't come home enough. Leo's the baby and gets graded on a curve because he's still figuring himself out. That's the family script. 6 months ago, my dad had a stroke. He survived, but it took a chunk of his words and a lot of his balance. The week he came home from rehab, I moved into my old room to help, thinking 2 weeks max, then I'd set up a caregiver schedule and head back to my life. 2 weeks turned into 2 months of physical therapy appointments, pill sorters, endless calls with insurance, and explaining to mom why dad can't have grapefruit juice anymore. Evan came once a week to mow and pray over the yard, and Leo would occasionally show up at 10 p.m. with smoothies and stick around long enough to make a mess in the kitchen. The 4th week, I started a Google Calendar for my dad's meds and PT and send it to the family group chat with color coding and reminders. If we do this consistently, he could get back most of his mobility. Evan replied with a thumbs up emoji. Leo heart reacted and said, "You're heroes." Mom called me into the living room and said, "I don't want the boys feeling micromanaged. It's been like that my whole life. Me doing the invisible work and somehow coming off as bossy while they collect gratitude for showing face." Anyway, the cabin. My grandparents built a small A-frame by a lake an hour from our town back in the 60s. It was our escape. Grandpa taught us to fish there. Grandma taught me to cheat at cribbage. After they died, the cabin became this ghost that everyone talked about, but no one actually used. Leaky roof, raccoons in the attic, the deck rotting in a way that should be a PSA. Still, we kept paying taxes on it because we're sentimental, and because saying we're selling the cabin would start a nuclear winter in our family group text. 2 months into Dad's recovery, Evan and Mom called what they called a house meeting. They made coffee like it was an event. Evan did the pastor voice he uses when he wants to sound objective. "We need to talk about the cabin," he said. "It's a financial drain and Dad can't maintain it anymore. I think it's time to sell." Dad, who was sitting in his recliner in his pajama pants and college sweatshirt, took a long time to say anything. Searching for words is like fishing with a bent hook now. He pointed at me, then at his chest, then opened his hand like a fan. Mom rubbed his shoulder and said, "He agrees, it's the practical thing." I said, "Can we wait a few months? It's his life's place. He just got home." Evan said waiting would cost money we don't have, and that he'd already talked to a realtor just to get numbers. I asked when he had time to talk to realtors, because I could barely keep up with prescriptions. He said, "Some of us are busy too, Maya." Then he looked at Dad and said, "It's what you'd want, right? For us to be responsible?" Dad stared at the family photos on the wall like they were strangers. I didn't have the energy to fight then, so I said, "Show me the numbers." Evan slid a folder across the table like a movie villain. Inside were photos of the cabin, half of which I'd taken and texted him, a list of comps, and a rough breakdown of taxes and repairs. It actually made a decent case, but there's a difference between can and should, and I didn't trust their definition of we. After the meeting, I found Dad awake in the den at 2 a.m., TV on mute, watching a fishing show where nothing was happening. His hand was drumming a rhythm on the armrest like it used to when he drafted emails. I sat on the ottoman. "Do you want to sell?" I asked. He moved his hand like he was writing in the air. Then he tapped his chest with 2 fingers. Then he tapped his left pants pocket. I thought he was pointing to his heart pocket. He meant literally my pocket. I reached into his pocket. We're way past pretending we don't do weird caregiving things, and found a small brass key, old and warm and sharp with edges, safe deposit box key. The bank's name was etched on one side. He made the hand sign for shh and then the sign he made when we were kids, meaning drive. I asked, now? He nodded. The clock glowed 2:14. Mom's a light sleeper. Evan has a sixth sense for when I do something he can disapprove of, but Dad doesn't ask for things. He quietly withers until you guess. So we put on jackets. I put Dad in the passenger seat with a blanket over his knees, like the world's most conspiratorial toddler. We drove to the bank. Obviously it was closed. Dad laughed, a breath out his nose. First laugh I'd heard in weeks, like he'd remembered that banks are not 24/7. We went back the next morning during banking hours. Mom was teaching piano lessons and Evan was in a meeting. I wheeled Dad to the counter. The teller looked at the key, looked at my dad, and did the type of small-town blink that says I know who you are, but I'm pretending this is normal. We went into one of those little vault rooms that make you feel like you're in an old spy movie. Dad's hands shook while he slid the box out. Inside, manila envelope, handwriting that wasn't his, Grandma's, that neat slanted script with the capital G like a flourish. The envelope said, for Maya. My hands went numb. I looked at him. He nodded, the most emphatic motion I'd seen him make since the stroke. Inside the envelope, a letter from my grandparents, dated the year I turned 18, telling me they were proud of me, for being the kid who woke up early to help Grandpa with the doc, for sneaking extra cherries to Grandma when her doctor said she couldn't have sugar, for being the one who asked questions no one else wanted to answer. There was a short paragraph about each grandkid. Mine was the longest, which made me cry and also made me feel like I was betraying someone. There was also a deed, the cabin's deed, transferred to me. It had been recorded properly with the county and everything. The letter said, softly and without any drama, that they wanted the cabin to belong to the one who keeps the light on. They believed I'd either fix it or let it go with kindness, but that it should be my choice. The paperwork showed that my parents had been co-trustees, and this transfer happened quietly, legally, 2 months after my 18th birthday. I sat there in the little vault room, feeling like a magician had pulled a rabbit out of my chest. Dad squeezed my hand. He was crying. When we got home, I asked Mom, "Did you know the cabin is in my name?" She didn't blink. She said, "Don't be ridiculous." I showed her the deed. She went pale in a way I've only seen once, and the nurse told us the stroke was ischemic. She recovered fast. "Well," she said, "we always intended to treat it as a family asset." I said, but it's not a family asset. Grandma and Grandpa decided." She said, "Your grandparents were sentimental. We're practical. We can't let one person's whimsy bankrupt all of us." I said, "They were your parents." That's when she did what she always does, pulled out the mom ledger. "Who held your hand after your tonsil surgery? Who edited your college essays? Who drove you back to campus when your car died? Who took out a second mortgage when Evan needed to start his business? Family sacrifices. We don't keep score." Except, she just kept score. I told her I wasn't agreeing to a sale, not while Dad was still recovering, and not until I'd seen the cabin myself, and figured out what repairs would actually cost. Her voice went brittle. "If you want to be selfish," she said, "that's your choice." 2 hours later, Evan texted, "We need to talk. You blindsided Mom. This is not how family handles things." I replied, "I didn't blindside anyone. Grandma and Grandpa gave me the cabin. I just learned today, because Mum never told me." He said, "You think I knew?" I said, "Did you?" He didn't answer for an hour. Then, "Does it matter?" That night, Mom made chicken parm and set the table like a truce. Halfway through dinner, she said very calmly, "We're going to tell the cousins that you decided to keep the cabin for yourself. That way, when they ask for summer weekends, they'll know to ask you." She smiled like a person saying something polite. I nearly choked. Dad put his fork down with a clatter that felt like a small earthquake. "No," he said. Just that, clear as glass. The silence afterward felt like the world tilted slightly off its axis. Dad tried to say more, but the words stuck and came out wrong. A tangle of sounds. He slapped the table in frustration, not at anyone, just at his own mouth. I took his hand. Evan said, "Let's not stress Dad." Mum said, "Exactly. We should be united." I said, "We can be united around the truth." She scraped her chair back. The truth is that your grandparents never understood how many burdens your father and I carry. The truth is that Dad's fist hit the table again, and he pointed at me, then at his own chest. Then he made the little fishing casting gesture he used to teach us. Her, me, cabin. The pieces rearranged in my head. He wasn't saying the cabin is mine, I already knew. He was saying we, he, and I would decide. I took him to the cabin the next morning. The deck was worse than I remembered. One board literally disintegrated under the toe of my shoe. Raccoon poop in the entryway. A note from a neighbor tucked in the doorframe. We've been keeping an eye. Call if you need a hand. Rita, lot 12. Dad sat on the sun-warmed step and closed his eyes. I watched his shoulders release like a place can lower your blood pressure. We walked the perimeter slowly. He touched the side of the house as we went, like he was reading Braille. He peered at the lake through the trees, the same way he always had, measuring wind on the water with his eyes, as if even the ripples had grammar. He looked at me and said haltingly, You do. I do what? I asked. Keep, he said. Then fix or sell. You do. I thought my heart would break wide open. I called Rita from lot 12. She came over with a mug in one hand and a toolbox in the other, because of course she did. She's in her 60s, sun-browned, the kind of neighbor who keeps spare screws labeled by size in a tackle box. She told me which contractors were good and which ones overcharged. She gave me names, numbers, and a post-it that said, "Tell Frank you're Walt's daughter, my grandpa." "He'll knock 10% off for Walt," she said. "We all still owe Walt." Then she whispered, "Your mum already told people you're selling. Half the lake knows." I drove back furious. When I walked in, Mum was on the phone saying, "We're listing next week." She hung up when she saw me. "What?" she said, pure innocence. "I thought you'd made your decision." I said, "I have. I'm not selling." She looked at me like I'd spit in her coffee. "You live in a one-bedroom apartment and you can't even keep a plant alive." "Then it's my plant to kill," I said, and I hated how petty it sounded. Evan came over that evening. He started with diplomacy. "Look, we can structure the sale so you get a chunk. We're not trying to cheat you." "Stop talking like you're my accountant," I said. "You don't get to split proceeds from something Grandma and Grandpa gave to me," he said. "It's a family asset even if the paper says otherwise." "Words mean things," I said. He rolled his eyes so hard I could hear it. In the end, I told him this. "I'm keeping the cabin for a year. I'll assess repairs. I'll either fix it enough to make it usable, or I'll decide to sell it on my own terms. In the meantime, I'd like help with Dad 3 days a week, because I have a job that is not casserole coordinator." Mum said, "I'm not bribing you with your father's health." I said, "That's not what I asked, but thanks for saying the quiet part out loud." She stood up, took a breath, and said, "I'm very disappointed in you, Maya." I said, "That's okay. I'm not a church raffle." We haven't spoken much since. Update 1, 2 weeks later. Leo surprised me. He showed up at the cabin with a toolbox and a YouTube degree in deck repair. He'd been quiet during the whole asset conversation, drifting in and out, trying not to get yelled at. He texted me, "Can I come up? I'm not good at talking, but I can rip things apart and sometimes put them back together." We spent all day pulling rotten boards and laughing at a raccoon that looked like it owed us money. At sunset, we sat on the steps with pizza. He said, "I hate how you and Mum fight. She's meanest to the ones she thinks are the strongest." I said, "She thinks you're not strong." He shrugged. "That's why I get to be a mess." He took a breath like he'd been holding it for years. "I knew about the deed," he said. "I saw it once. Mom had it in her desk when I was 14. She told me if I said anything, I'd make everything harder for Dad, because Evan would hold it over him. I didn't understand, but I kept the secret. I'm sorry." I wanted to be furious, but he looked so small and sincere. "Thanks for telling me now," I said. He nodded. "Evan knows too," he added, almost apologetically. He pretends he doesn't understand the legal stuff, but he does when it helps him. That night I called Evan. "We can either do this like siblings or like adversaries. Siblings is cheaper." He said he wasn't interested in drama. I said, "Then stop creating it." He hung up on me. Update 2, 1 month later. Dad had a good speech day. Out of nowhere he said, "Letter, tell." So we did something I wasn't sure we'd ever do. We sat Mum down and read Grandma's letter aloud. I read it slowly, the part where Grandma said she'd seen who keeps the light on. Mum stared at the wall and didn't blink. When I finished, she said in a voice so flat it scared me, "Your grandmother never liked me." Dad said, thick but clear, "Yes, she did." Mum flinched. Then all the air seemed to leave her at once. "You think I don't miss them?" she said to no one. "You think I don't wake up at 2 a.m. making the grocery list in my head? You think—" She stopped. Then, "Fine, keep your cabin, keep your lake. Don't come to me when the roof caves in." I said gently, "I'd come to you if you wanted to come to me." She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Later, Evan texted a group message, me, Mom, Dad, that said, "Legal note. If you die, the cabin should go to the family. We should set that up now." I stared at it for 5 full minutes. Dad sent back, "No, just that." I laughed so hard I cried. Update 3, 3 months later. We fixed the deck, Leo and I plus Frank who owed Walt. Rita taught me how to winterize the pipes. Dad comes up every Saturday if his legs will cooperate. We sit on the steps and he tells me stories in fragments that I somehow understand anyway. The lake is low this year, little rings of sand like tree rings at the edge. I started keeping a notebook in the kitchen with cabin things. What we fix, what we learn, who helped. The first page says, "Keep the light on" in Grandma's handwriting. I traced it from the letter. It makes my chest ache in a good way. Mum still won't come. She sends practical texts about Dad's blood pressure and church announcements, but doesn't ask about the cabin. Evan, to my knowledge, has not told the entire town that I'm a selfish witch, which is progress. He hasn't been up, but he did drop off a new first aid kit and a box of light bulbs at my apartment with no note. I'm choosing to read that as peace. Here's the part I didn't expect. I don't actually care as much about the cabin as an object. The roof lines are crooked, the kitchen smells like cedar and mice, the dock is a tetanus playground. But every time I sweep the entryway or scrub raccoon handprints off the window glass, it feels like I'm taking care of more than wood. It feels like I'm finally doing something for me that isn't a reaction to someone else's disappointment. Maybe that's selfish, or maybe it's what my grandparents meant all along. I don't know what we'll do next year. Maybe I'll sell, maybe I'll rent a dumpster, tear out the mouse hotel cabinets and learn to tile. Maybe Dad's words will keep coming back, one at a time, like stubborn birds. I know this. When silt collects at the mouth of a river, you dredge it or the water goes somewhere else. Our family has been silted up for a long time. Secrets layered on resentments, layered on martyrdom, layered on we're practical. I'm not a miracle worker, but I can dredge my part. I can put up a solar light on the porch and make sure it's on even when no one is there. Last weekend, Leo stood on the new deck and said, "If we had a raft, could we make it to the little island?" I said, "Probably, if we were careful." He grinned like a kid. Let's be careful. We weren't. We fell in. We came up laughing. Dad clapped from the steps. Mum would have had a fit. Evan would have made a spreadsheet. For a few minutes, there was no ledger, no deed, no family asset. Just cold water and sun, and the three of us, loud with the kind of laughter you don't see coming. That night, Rita knocked and handed me a key on a yellow lanyard. "Spare for lot 12, she said, "in case I'm not home and you need a ladder." I hung it on a nail by the door next to the cabin key. 2 keys swinging, a small, bright sound in the quiet. I texted Mom a picture of the sunset over the lake from the front step. No caption. She didn't respond, but 2 hours later, she sent a recipe for Grandma's blueberry buckle. No caption. I made it in the tiny oven that runs hot on one side and burns the edges if you don't turn the pan halfway through. It tasted like summers before we knew how to be cruel to each other. This isn't a triumph story, it's not even done. But the porch light's on. My sister swapped Grandma's ring with a fake, and the proof is in a shoebox subreddit, our family drama. Flair long update I'm the oldest, 33 female. My sister Nora is 30 female. And our brother Jamie is 27 male. Our grandma died 5 years ago and left behind exactly 2 things anyone fought over: her recipe box and her engagement ring. The ring isn't Cartier or anything, but the stone is old cut, set low in a warm gold band, and it lived on Grandma's hand for 62 years. We all grew up watching it flash when she stirred soup, when she clapped after school plays, when she squeezed your fingers during church. It is the sound of her laugh somehow made visible. Grandma's will was basic and loving. The ring to my first granddaughter to marry. That was me by default back then. I was engaged. But the wedding blew up. Story for another day involving a joint bank account and $3,000 spent at a wellness retreat that turned out to be a cryptocurrency seminar. I called my mum and said, I'm postponing. She said she was proud. I mailed back deposits. We ate the Costco cake in my apartment with plastic forks and called it a party. 2 months later, Nora got engaged to her boyfriend, a charming man with the emotional range of a teaspoon. The kind of guy who says, I'm just being honest when he's being cruel. Everyone loves him because he carves turkeys and plants tulips. I wanted to love him. I wanted to be the cool, supportive sister who knew the ring clause by heart and didn't make a fuss. You should have it, I told Nora. Grandma would want you to wear it. I said this through a tight throat, but I meant it. My mum took us to her closet where she keeps the sacred things in an old hat box. Photos, the recipe cards that smell like nutmeg and paper dust, and a smaller velvet box. She opened it. The ring inside looked like the ring. Same setting, same band, same soft low glow. I pressed my thumb to the underside like I always did as a kid, and felt the tiny groove where Grandma's band was repaired after she slammed her hand in the Buick door in 1979. It was there. It felt right. We all cried like a Hallmark commercial. Fast forward 2 years, Nora's marriage is performatively perfect. She posts about married besties and date night after meal prep. She also texts me late at night to say she feels like she's disappearing. I tell her to find a therapist. She says therapy is for people with real trauma. I tell her that's a myth. She says she'll think about it. Then she posts a photo of the ring over a salad. Last month, I took Mom to get a small chip in her front tooth fixed. She bit a fork because she reads the news while eating. This is our family. After the dentist, we stopped at a jeweler to have my watch battery replaced. Mum wandered to the estate case because Mom is a magpie. I'm bored scrolling my phone when I hear her say, huh. I look up. She's staring at a ring. It's Grandma's ring. Not a cousin, not a look-alike. Grandma's ring. The old cut stone with the wonky facet at 6 o'clock. The band with the gentle warp you can only see if you squint. The nicks from decades of countertops and gardening. The jeweler lifted it out, and my body did that weird hot-cold thing you get when a memory walks into the room wearing someone else's shoes. I said, that's not possible. Mum said, it's not. The jeweler, kindly because he had the face of a man who's seen every flavor of meltdown, said, estate pieces find their way home sometimes. He tapped a loop on the glass. Want to see the engraving? He tilted the ring so the inner band caught the light. There, right where Grandma had it done after Grandpa came home from the Navy, were the initials and date, W plus E 1957. My grandfather Walter, my grandmother Elaine. My knees went weak. Mum said very calmly to the jeweler, where did this come from? He looked at the tag. We bought it off a private seller last year. We don't keep names in the case record, but I can check the log. He went to the back and came out with a clipboard. He scanned, then paused. I can't disclose, he said, expression going professional. But the seller provided proof of ownership, a photograph of the ring on an older woman's hand, a scan of a handwritten note, and a family photo to corroborate. He could not legally tell us. He didn't need to. Mum's face had gone blank in the way it does when she is very, very angry. We left, watch battery forgotten. In the parking lot, she sat in the passenger seat with both hands folded around her purse, like a life preserver. We gave Nora something, she said in a small voice. We didn't give her this. When we got to Nora's house, her husband was raking leaves in neat, anxious lines. Nora opened the door with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She was wearing the ring, but not that ring. A ring that looked almost exactly like it. Same shape, same setting, same warmth. But the stone was slightly higher. The band lacked that tiny groove my thumb remembered. The wonky facet was too perfect. If you didn't know, you'd never know. Mum said, where is Grandma's ring? Like a gun going off in a library. Nora blinked. This is Grandma's ring, she said. Light, practiced. She lifted her hand like an influencer. See? Same. You're being weird. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the freezer because I didn't know where else to look. My grandma kept cash in frozen waffles. Our family has traditions. Nothing. I checked the junk drawer. Batteries, menus, 3 Allen wrenches, an orphaned key. I turned around and both my mother and my sister were watching me. One horrified, one offended. "Don't search my house," Nora said, color climbing her throat. "What is wrong with you?" Mum said, quieter now. "When did you sell it?" You know that moment when you realize someone you love has already told themselves every story they needed to survive the thing they did? Nora exhaled. "It's my ring," she said flatly. "Grandma left it to the first granddaughter to marry. I'm married. It's mine." Mum's voice broke. "She left it so you'd wear it," she said. "Not so you'd flip it." "I didn't flip it," Nora snapped. "I made an adult financial decision. We needed to pay off credit cards." Ah, the charming husband strikes again. "And I replaced it with a replica. No one would have known if you hadn't gone snooping in jewelers like some Victorian ghost." "Where is the money?" I asked. She spit out the number. It wasn't even impressive, mid-4 figures after fees. She said they paid off a card name I won't list because the internet is forever. And they bought a new couch. The couch sat behind her, smug and beige. Mom sat down slowly at the table as if gravity had doubled. "You didn't even ask," she said. "You didn't say, 'Hey, can we talk about it?' You didn't say, 'I'm in trouble?'" Nora's face did a twist I recognized from childhood. The one that means, if I admit I did wrong, I'll drown. She said, "You would have said no." "Maybe," Mom replied, "and then we would have figured out something else." I said, because I couldn't help it. "You wore a fake to the funeral last month." We had an aunt pass. Nora had posted a hand-holding photo captioned, "Family is everything." She flinched. Her husband came in with leaf bits on his sweater and said, "This is getting dramatic." He looked at Mom. "It's a ring. It's a rock. Your daughter made a smart move." "It is not a rock," Mum said. And for a second I saw the woman who kept the lights on through layoffs and braces, and the year Dad forgot birthdays. "It's a promise." We left without touching the couch. I didn't sleep. I kept seeing Grandma's hands, wrinkled, soft, smelling like Pond's cold cream, reaching for mine, except the ring wavered like a mirage. The next morning, I drove back to the jeweler. I asked if the ring could be put on hold. He said yes for 72 hours with a deposit. I put down the deposit with shaky hands and my emergency funds lungs. Then I did the thing I didn't want to do. I texted our brother Jamie. Jamie is conflict avoidant in the way that looks like chill, but is really a full-time job of not being inside his own body. He came over with coffee and a neutral sweatshirt. I told him everything. He closed his eyes for a long time. Then he said, "Nora pawned Grandma's guitar when she moved in with Ben's sophomore year. Do you remember that?" I did not, because apparently we were all sleeping through our own lives. She replaced it with a Craigslist special and hoped no one would notice. Mum did. She noticed the burn mark on the headstock was gone. He looked at me. She forgave her then too. Mum has been collecting quiet humiliations for years, like buttons in a jar. I went back to Nora's. She didn't let me in right away. When she did, her mascara was smudged and the house smelled like new vacuum. "I was going to tell you," she said without saying when. I said, "We can fix this." She said, "I don't want to be fixed." I said, "I put the ring on hold." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You don't get to control me," she said. "This isn't about control," I said. "It's about the truth." She laughed. "Oh, the truth. You and your truth, like it's a trophy." She paced. "Do you know what it's like to be the second daughter? To get hand-me-down everything? To hear your sister did it this way? Like there's a right way to be a person?" She looked at me, eyes bright with a decade of swallowed resentment. The ring was the first thing that was mine, and not contingent. I made a choice, I said softly, and it hurt people who love you. "I'm always the villain in your stories," she said. That hurt because there's a little truth in it. Sisters write each other as archetypes and get mad when the other refuses the role. I told her I wanted to buy the ring back if she couldn't. She stared. "With what money?" she asked. I told her about my emergency fund. She laughed again, uglier this time. "Of course you have an emergency fund," I said. "We can split it between us. Jamie can help." I hadn't asked Jamie. I was betting on his good heart. It was rude. It was necessary. She said, "No." Then she said, "Maybe." Then she said, "If I give you something, will you shut up?" "Give me what?" I asked. She went to the bedroom. She came back with a shoebox, the ugliest, most basic cardboard shoebox you've ever seen, the kind with a size sticker still on the side. She set it down like contraband. Inside, receipts, folded sheets of notebook paper, the little paper envelope jewelers use to put your ring in when they clean it. On the envelope, in Nora's careful schoolteacher handwriting, "I'm sorry." Underneath, a letter. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It was addressed to the version of herself who would someday admit what she'd done. I think. It said she felt small and tired and like her marriage was a performance she was failing at. It said she sold the ring because she wanted one thing to be easy. It said she knew it wasn't easy. It asked for forgiveness she didn't believe she deserved. I said, "You never meant me to read this." She shook her head. "Then why show me?" She said, "Because I don't want to be the only one who knows." We bought the ring back. Jamie brought cash and a look of a man who will go to war if necessary. We stood at the counter like kids in trouble. The jeweler put the ring on the velvet and pushed it toward us with both hands. He said quietly, "I'm glad it's home." We drove to Mum's. We put the ring in her palm. She didn't close her hand right away. She looked at Nora. "You broke my heart," she said, voice steady. "Don't do it again." Nora started to cry in that way where your shoulders shake and there's no sound. Mum pulled her in and smoothed her hair like we were 6. "We make mistakes," Mum said. "We make amends." We ate pizza at the table where everything important happens. No one mentioned the couch. Update 1 week later. Nora came over with a grocery bag of lemons. She said, "Let's make lemon bars like Grandma did when she was sorry." We did. Zest under our nails. Kitchen smelling like summer. She told me she had called a therapist. I didn't cheer. I said, "I'm proud of you," and left it there. She said she told her husband she was taking a break from him. She was staying at Mum's for a minute. I wanted to say, "Stay at mine," but I didn't want to play savior in a story that wasn't asking for one. We took the fake ring to a jeweler and asked them to engrave the inside with W+E 1957 anyway, as a joke and a reminder. The jeweler side-eyed us and did it. We put the fake in the recipe box with a note. "This is the ring we wore when we were poor and proud and still learning." The real ring went back in the velvet, and then, this was my mother's idea, we took it out again and put it on Mom's hand, for a while. Not as a punishment, as a reset. It lived with me until I know it can live with one of you without turning into a debt snowball, she said dry. Nora nodded. I agree. Jamie, who had been quiet, said, "Can I take the recipe cards this month?" We all froze. He's never asked for anything. Mom said yes and kissed his cheek like she was releasing him from a spell. We told Grandma's story out loud that night, how she once lost the ring for 2 weeks and found it in the pocket of her gardening sweater, how Grandpa pretended not to care and then cried into the dishwasher when she put it back on. It felt like fixing a picture frame and putting it back on the wall straight. Update 2, 1 month later. Nora moved into a small apartment with windows that get morning light. She bought a second-hand couch in a joyful, ridiculous floral pattern. She texted me, "I hate beige now." Her husband sent 3 paragraph texts about betrayal and optics. She did not reply. She sent him a simple message through her lawyer about separating finances and returning the television that was technically his. I bought her a plunger and a toolbox, because that's love. She asked to borrow the ring for a dinner with our aunt. "I want to tell her the truth," she said. Mom said yes, and Nora wore it like a person who knows the difference between owning and taking care. She returned it the next morning with a bag of bagels and a receipt for reinsuring the policy. She put the shoebox of receipts and the apology letter into Mum's hands and said, "I want you to hold this for me until I can hold it without flinching." Jamie found the guitar. Not Grandma's, that's gone, but the same model, same year, same tobacco burst, same stupid burn mark he made with a cheap candle when he was 13. We replicated it in the driveway with a tea light and a lot of laughing, sure crying. He said, "It's not the same, but it's close." We put a sticker inside the sound hole. We told the truth. Sometimes replacement isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's a promise that you'll do better with the next thing you're given. Update 3. Today. Mom called us over for stew. She took the ring off and set it in the center of the table like a candle. I've been thinking about the clause in the will, she said. It was meant to be sweet. It turned into a trap. She looked at me. When you marry again, if you marry again, it won't be because of a ring. She looked at Nora. And when you wear this, it will be because you choose to care for it, not because you technically qualified. We decided something that made all of us breathe easier. The ring will rotate, not by weddings, by seasons. 4 months with each of us, me, Nora, Mum, until one day it lands somewhere and refuses to leave, and we'll know that's right. We wrote it down in plain language and put it in the recipe box with the fake ring and the lemon bar card that has butter stains from the 1980s. We didn't notarize it. We notarized it with stew and laughter and the quiet clicking of a band against a bowl. After dinner, Mom walked us to the door and said, "I'm not mad anymore." I believed her. She said, if your grandmother were here, she'd tell us all to stop being dramatic and to pass the salt. We passed the salt. We hugged in the hallway too long. On the way out, Nora touched my sleeve. "I don't want to be the villain," she said. I said, "Then don't be." She nodded like it was a new idea. We walked to our cars under that blue hour light that makes everything look like forgiveness. I wear the ring this winter. I'm not engaged. I'm not even dating. I wear it when I chop onions and when I sign for packages, and when I call the plumber about the radiator that sounds like a ghost learning tap dance. It catches the light exactly the way it did in Grandma's kitchen. It doesn't make me married. It makes me careful. Tonight, I put it back in its box to sleep. I touched the engraving with my thumbnail. BW+E 1957. I said their names out loud in my apartment. Walter, Elaine. I said ours, me, Nora, Mom, Jamie. I'm trying to build a world where we don't need shoeboxes full of apologies. But if we do, we'll write them on better paper. We'll sign them. We'll hand them over before they turn into secrets. I texted the group chat a picture of the ring on the recipe card for lemon bars. Jamie sent back a guitar emoji and a flame, his idea of a joke. Mum sent a heart. Nora sent a lemon, a ring, and a shoebox. We are ridiculous. We are trying.